So in terms of kind of the history of portfolios, for a long time academia was a lot like this. Stay out of my face. My classroom is my domain. Only my students and I share the secrets behind the closed doors. But that's pretty much changed. Classroom observations are becoming much more common, particularly for promotion and tenure. And portfolios are becoming much more common, especially for job applications. And I'll go into that in a bit. So there has been a change, and the classroom doors are opening. So what the portfolio answers is, how do you show or even know how well you're doing as a teacher or a lab tech or whatever your responsibilities are? And the portfolio gives you an answer to that question, and that's an important question. So what is a professional portfolio? What do you think? Anyone want to venture a definition? Yes, it's a folder full of stuff, and it stays a folder. It becomes a portfolio when you put your organizing intelligence on it. The problem with most people's conception of portfolios is they think of it as just stuff. Huge binders that are just crammed with material. So I hope when you leave you won't think that. It's not. It's way more than that. So couple of definitions. Again, I won't read them, but there's two quotes from a music teacher, and I don't know what Wyatt and Loper are, but they're emphasizing that portfolios help you reflect, help you look at yourself, help you look at your work. And the term artifact is often used in conjunction with portfolios, and I'll talk about that later. So some common descriptors. A portfolio is very selective. Now that sounds like, oh good, I get to fudge it. I leave out all the bad stuff and only put in the good. It's selective in the sense that you pick what you want to highlight, but you still need a complete portfolio. You can't just have obvious holes in it. Like you can't say selected student evaluations. They're going to know that you just pulled out all the bad ones. So it's student evaluations. And you'd have all of them, say, for the last 2 years, but you choose to focus your comments only on, say, one aspect of your evaluation. It's certainly a collection. It's extremely diverse. How diverse depends on you. It often shows development over time. And I started teaching many, many years ago, and I was very, very teacher-focused. It was all about me. I mean, I admit that most of us start that way. And gradually I've shifted to a much more learning-centered focus. And so that would be reflected in a portfolio over time. It's highly reflective and collaborative in the sense that you want to get somebody else to read it. In fact, I just left our Teaching and Learning Center, and we had 6 people in there as a writing circle, helping critique each other's material. You want to do the same thing. You want to get some portfolio partners. And the point of a portfolio to me is to advance your growth, because it is highly reflective. Hopefully you're thinking about what you're doing and why you're doing it and how you can make it even better. So portfolios now are used in a lot of ways. They're very common for promotion and tenure, but usually they're just stuff. No informing intelligence. And they're also used a lot, as I mentioned, for job interviews. And I'm going to talk about the 2 parts of the portfolio, the reflective commentary, which is when you comment on the appendices. That reflective commentary can be sent ahead with your job application letter, and that will give them a sense of the portfolio without having to mail a whole huge binder. Or many people are going to electronic portfolios. And in fact, for students, a lot of schools maintain websites that students can keep their portfolio on forever, I guess, and and use it for job applications and update it and so forth as they go. Very common in TA training. And when I I did a course on college teaching at University of Nevada, Reno. I had students doing portfolios. Several of your departments have courses in college teaching. I've looked at the syllabus, and I'm going to meet with the anthropology teacher next week, and they're all requiring teaching portfolios, if not professional portfolios. I call them professional portfolios because I think you need to include research, service, and teaching. Teaching is just part of what you do when you're a faculty member. Very common in teaching awards. I coached our applicants for the Regents Awards, which unfortunately discontinued because of the budget. But we had 9 people receive teaching awards with huge stipends because they had beautiful portfolios. I mean, I'd like to think I helped, but the portfolio glitz doesn't in any way make up for the content. In other words, there has to be substance there. So all I helped was with the organization. The quality was there, and the folks really deserved it. It's used for faculty development. I was doing a workshop a couple of years ago, and this man said he wanted to learn how to do portfolios because he was retiring in about a year, and he wanted to leave a portfolio as a legacy to others, to new teachers coming into his department. And then you can use them for specialized uses. When I went on the job market, I created a professional portfolio that reflected my teaching and learning center. So my application letter was my reflective piece, but it referenced all kinds of stuff. My teaching philosophy statement, I put in annual reports, I put in our workshops, including flyers, classroom observations I'd done, and articles I'd published on faculty development. So I sent the letter ahead like I would a reflection, and then brought the portfolio for the actual interview. And one of the schools was nice enough to mail it back to me, so I'm glad I have something I can show, because it does take a lot of time. Less time than you'd think, but it still takes some time. Okay, so important thing about portfolios is, especially if they're being used for promotion and tenure, you need to be completely candid about them. Who's going to see them? How are they going to be used? I even have developed rubrics for critiquing portfolios, so there's no mystery about the pieces that should be in them. Not at this institution, but at a former institution, I was on a teaching awards committee, and a person that I thought was the best qualified by far, because I'd visited all the classrooms of all the teachers, did not receive the award because he didn't present a teaching portfolio, a teaching philosophy statement. Well, there was no rubric to tell him he should have done that, and I really thought that was unfair. So I became the chair, and then we had a rubric the next year, so there were no surprises. One of the things you want to do is to make the cut, hence the scissors. You need to put in your portfolio certain things that are expected. One thing that's expected would be a CV. Sample syllabi are often an expectation, and student evaluations. So those are pretty much givens. In terms of designing a course, there's probably more than 3 ways, but oftentimes faculty members will just list topics. That's pretty boring. You know, it doesn't show any theme or thought, or even listing activities doesn't show a lot of thought. So when you design a course, you want to look at being systematic and integrated, and again, going back to the kind of buzzword now, learning centered. Okay, let me ask you to turn to a partner and indicate your primary reason for preparing a portfolio. Why are you here? How do you think you'll use a portfolio? So just talk for a minute with somebody sitting next to you. Okay, keep your partner. And what I'd like you to do is think, pair, share. And that's the cartoon. Suppose I be the one who thinks, you be the one who speaks. Good, then we'll switch. That's not how you do it. With your partner, describe your work responsibilities. And again, some prompts about your work responsibilities. What do you teach, or what are your other responsibilities? You mentioned you're a grader. Who do you teach or help in other ways? Where? Under what circumstances? How often do you teach or serve as a grader? How much responsibility do you have? For example, if you're a grader, do you design the rubric, or does the faculty member give you the rubric? And what are some other considerations? So just have about a 3-minute conversation, please, with your partner and share what you do. Okay, let me ask for your attention again. And I want to congratulate you. You've just written the first part of, well, you've just verbalized the first part of your portfolio, because that's what you do. You give a context for your portfolio. Who are you, and what do you do, and how often, and under what circumstances? When I mentioned the course I taught on college teaching at UNR, we had a portfolio celebration, I guess we called it, where we put out tables and labeled them by discipline. So if you wanted to look at engineering portfolios, you could go over to the engineering table, leaf through them, anthropology or art history, and they'd write comments on the portfolio. And I was totally amazed, because of course I was walking around looking at them too, how many people skipped the context. So you're looking at a portfolio and you're saying, is this person teaching art history or calculus? You know, you had to thumb through the thing to even figure it out. So the very first paragraph you have is the conversation you just had with your partner. Who are you, and what do you do, and what's the context? Okay, so you want to also allow for differences in a portfolio. My portfolio in English literature looks very different than my professional portfolio as a director of a teaching center. It would look very different than your portfolio in, say, civil engineering. So that's perfectly fine, and that's one of the things I love about portfolios, is you literally are in control of it. And you can use it to showcase what you have. Often at most institutions, if you're a faculty member, you're going to have typically 40% teaching, 40% research, and 20% service. But that may not be true at all schools, but you want to find out what the expectations are before you accept a job. So if your interest lies in research and not teaching, or vice versa, you're not accepting a job at the wrong school, where you won't be able to meet those expectations, or you'll be miserable trying. One of the things that I strongly urge is tying things together. And this again is where a lot of people doing portfolios just literally stuff binders with mindlessly. And what you want to do in your reflective piece, and I'm going to get to that in the next slide, it is some kind of thesis statement that pulls it all together. Now, it's hard to come up with one, to be honest, because we live very complex lives. But I worked on a project with a man named Peter Selden, who's kind of a guru for portfolios. I was at Rutgers, and Peter gave the kind of overarching, this is what a portfolio is, talk. And then there were, I think, 4 of us, and we were all assigned mentees. And we were there for a whole week. And so we met with our mentees one-on-one and helped them over the course of the week to shape their portfolio. So one of my mentees was a fabulous guy named Ned. If you're interested in reading the article that I wrote about this experience and other experiences, it's on our webpage. There's a lot of portfolio references on our webpage, including how to write a teaching philosophy statement, which is pretty much an expectation. Even if you're going to a job interview where they don't expect a full-blown portfolio, they'll often expect a teaching philosophy statement. So that's all on there. But anyway, Ned was just a fabulous guy. He was a world-famous scientist. His specialty was saving rainforests, so he consulted all over the world. But he took teaching seriously as well. So he taught both graduates, and he insisted on teaching the basic course in biology because he wanted to make a difference with undergraduates. He did a lot of work in the community, public service talks on saving rainforests and why it was important and so forth. So we were really completely at a loss during our first meeting as to how to tie this all together, to make some meaning out of it. And the next meeting, he practically came skipping in. He said, I have it. He said, I have it. Here's my thesis. No matter what I do, whether it's consulting about rainforests or teaching undergraduates or teaching graduate students or giving community service talks, no matter what I do, I want to help people learn to think like scientists. And bingo, it worked. When he talked about his syllabus, it was in the context of helping people think like scientists. His exams were geared that way. I mean, it really was a unifying idea that tied it all together. So if you can come up with that, that will really help shape your portfolio. So here's what your portfolio, I was going to say should look like, but it shouldn't look like a dog. But it'll have two parts. And the parts are the reflective commentary and the appendices. And in the reflective commentary, you're commenting on what appears in your appendix. So every appendix, the stuff that you put in there, your evals, your syllabus, your sample student work, and so forth, needs to have a comment, a brief comment, which is why we'll talk about highlighting. The appendices are the supporting documents that you're reflecting on. So the executive summary, or the, prefer to call it the reflective commentary, guidelines for that are to highlight and focus. So for example, you might have attended, say, 10 workshops over the course of your graduate career. And so you would say in your reflective commentary, over the course of my graduate career, or in the past 3 years, I've attended 10 faculty development workshops. See Appendix H. So you're sending them back there. And there are all the workshops. There are the thank you letters you receive from us, or maybe you've downloaded the flyers. Maybe you've even included handouts. But there's the stuff. And it's a lot because there's 10 workshops. But going back to your reflective commentary, you would say, of the 10 workshops I attended, the one that had the most impact on my teaching was the workshop on professional portfolios. And then why? So we're talking a paragraph. That's all, because you want to keep your reflective commentary to 7 pages or less, 7 to 5 pages roughly. So all you need to do a portfolio really is a hole punch for the appendices and some creativity, some thought, some reflection. And you're only writing original prose for about 5 to 7 pages. So it really isn't as time-consuming as you think. And again, you're selective about what goes into the portfolio, and certainly selective about what you're going to highlight. Same with syllabi. You might include syllabi for the past 3 years, all the courses you've taught. But in your reflective commentary, you would say, the syllabus that challenged me the most was the one I had to develop new for yada yada, and then why, and what was unique about it, and why you think it reflects your professionalism. So reflection is the key to a portfolio, and again, that's often overlooked. People only think of the appendices, the hole punch stuff. But without reflection, you have a scrapbook, not a portfolio. So you have to have it. So here's some attributes of effective reflection. A portfolio, your reflective commentary, should be written in the first person. Now, you may not be used to writing in the first person. After all, we're academics, right? But think how stilted it would sound if you were to say, the English professor, Dr. Millis, takes teaching very seriously. It would sound completely hokey. So you want to keep it in the first person, and you want to give an accurate description. Don't keep it at the superficial level. That's why you go in depth in your reflective commentary. It should be well written. I'm an English person, but trust me, I also review for several academic journals. Nothing will cause a paper to be rejected sooner than sloppy errors, because it's reflecting sloppy thinking. And so you want to be absolutely sure. I make friends with an English person, hey, and get them to be your portfolio partner. So you've got somebody that'll catch those little errors, but the errors that mean a lot to other people. It needs to be clear and concise, and it should be accurate and honest. It should reflect candor to show that you're a caring professional. Teaching philosophy statements are typically included in portfolios, and in a teaching philosophy statement, you examine your implicit and explicit assumptions about teaching. And they're not easy to write. It'll take you a couple of drafts, and you want to get somebody else to read it through to help you, coach you, give you advice. Sometimes you'll have a negative tone and you won't realize it, and they can pick that up. But it helps you think about what you believe about teaching. So what are your beliefs about how people learn, your role as an educator, about your discipline? You should be able to articulate why your discipline is important. If you can't, you're probably in the wrong discipline. You might think about switching. The format, activity here. Jot down some key ideas that guide drive your role as a professional involved. So let's start your teaching philosophy. Okay, let me give you a couple of minutes just working individually, or if you want, you can share with your partner. Okay, I'll ask for your attention again, and again, congratulate you. You've written part of your portfolio. It should make it easier. You don't have to reinvent the wheel and start completely over. I have somehow, what have I done with my little clicker thing?
Is it there? Right there?
Oh, thank you. Yeah, well, it was funny when, back in the old days, when we taught with chalk, you don't remember blackboards? I know they're like 8-track tapes. Nobody knows what they are anymore. But I was teaching overseas in Asia, military personnel on different military bases. And they were the best students ever because they were completely motivated. I taught in Japan, Korea, Okinawa, and Guam, and they were just so thrilled we were there. You know, I was teaching along the DMZ in Korea, and they could still take college courses. So they were just great students, but I had a bad habit of losing my chalk. Now I lose the remotes. And so at the end of one class, I remember somehow they managed to construct this huge piece of chalk, and they tied it to a rope so I could hang it around my neck. Oh, I wish I still had that. But okay, so we'll move on then to the appendices. Your teaching philosophy statement is typically folded into your reflective commentary, or it can be a standalone in one of your appendices, whichever works best for you. For the appendix, again, remember it's stuff that you've hole punched. They have to be clear so that somebody looking at your portfolio, whether it's electronic or it's a physical portfolio, knows what they're looking at. So you're going to annotate for your bibliography, for your appendices. And by integrity, I mean you don't pull stuff out so it has obvious holes. So you don't say some syllabi or selected evaluations or some comments from students. You want some kind of consistency, like all the courses you've taught over the last 2 years, or all the, in my case, English 101 courses you've taught, say, for the last 5 years. Don't go back too far unless for some reason you're showing change over time. Like if I had a letter I found that I had written to my chair when I was teaching at a community college, and I mean, it was so old, it was written on a typewriter, and the pages were yellow. But I was horrified when I read it later, because years later, because every sentence started with I did this, I did this, I did this. Nothing about the students and what the students were doing, what the students were learning. That would have been a good artifact to put in there to show change over time. Unfortunately, I've lost it, but oh well. Keep a folder, by the way, where you put stuff you think you might use. When you get those random emails from students that you just want to cry, they're so sweet and touching and make you feel so good, it's real easy to delete them or bury them. Put them in either an electronic file or a paper file. I use the top of my bookcase for my portfolio stuff. And then it's really easy when it comes time to put one together, because you're not searching for everything. Or discover you've thrown away your evals or thrown away your, probably don't throw away your syllabus, you'd have it electronically, but those little thank yous you get from students, or conference materials, or thank you letters that could document that you attended workshops. So put them together with integrity. The portfolio format is pretty obvious, and you've got it in your handouts. You typically will have a table of contents, and your table of contents will not necessarily go into detail, but can go into detail. There'll be a title page too before that. Again, just the one I used for job applications. I put, professional portfolio, my name and address, and where I was interviewing. This case was the University of Central Florida. And then my table of contents would come, I'd put the title page in here, and then the table of contents right afterwards. You want to include your executive summary. That's the next thing that comes, or your reflective commentary, because that's extremely important. And then you start, the executive summary or reflective commentary is going to have comments on all the appendices. Anything that's in your appendices you want to comment on. But there may be standalone things. For example, your CV might be a standalone, or your teaching philosophy statement. Now you can tab them if you like and put them in your, as appendix. If you discuss future goals, you won't have an appendix for that. And then you have your list of appendices, and they should be annotated. And by annotated, I mean don't just say syllabi, okay? You want to say English 101 syllabi from 2006 to 2011. So make it specific so that someone knows exactly what they're looking for. Now you can annotate them in a list, almost like a table of contents for your appendices, or you can also put them on the divider pages. So usually in a physical portfolio you'll have tabs, so you'll flip. Maybe you're interested in looking at the syllabi. So you go to the tab that says syllabi, and there on the front of the, that page that has the tab, it will explain what exactly follows, what the syllabi are. I'd mentioned the reflective commentary. You keep it 5 to 7 pages, so that means you might summarize. So if, for example, you have a tab where you have all your student evaluations for the past 3 years, what you might put in your reflective commentary would be a little summary table that gives your overall scores for those particular courses. So if someone looks at that summary table, if they believe you, they don't even need to flip to the tab that has all your evaluations. They've got a summary that's perfectly good, but your appendices are documenting in case they want to look further. So you need to organize it very carefully, even if it's electronic. And I believe there's a page on teaching awards that Dr. Martin put together. I have the portfolios of all the folks who received the Regents Awards, and I know Dr. Martin does, so I hope she put them up there. If she does, I'll look. I didn't even think about that till just now. But they should be out there because some of those are just works of beauty. Really well done. Very well done. Okay, well, let's look at artifacts. And artifacts are just a term for your appendices, the stuff. I'm so glad you used that term, stuff, Josh. It's very appropriate. That's what your appendices are. So, well, we've got anthropologists in here. So what's an artifact? Stuff. What kind of stuff?
Something that's representative of pastime, I guess.
Okay. Can everyone hear representative pastime? Or I'd say representative of culture. And it's typically man-made, often shaped with tools. But what you need to do with your artifacts is put them in context, as I've mentioned, and link them directly to the executive summary. So back to your teaching philosophy statement. What are some artifacts that you could include in your portfolio, and will your philosophy be reflected in that artifact? So just have another quick conversation with your partner. What are some things you think you're going to put in your appendices? Okay, I'm going to call you back. I just want to be sure we get out on time. Just a little reflection. One of the things that I'll recommend is that you work with at least one colleague and possibly more. Teaching portfolio partner or a portfolio partner. So what would be some qualities you would look for? Again, turn to your partner and just have a conversation. You don't want a person like this, I guarantee, like any of these folks. What kind of person would you want to choose? What qualities would they have? The more experienced the person is, they're actually, when I talk about portfolio partners, I'm thinking of peers, you know, like 2 graduate students or 2 faculty members working together. But sometimes you can have like a portfolio mentor, which was the role I played when I was at Rutgers. And in that case, that person is literally an expert in portfolios. But you certainly want them to be an expert in teaching, or at least know your field. Now, I'm going to recommend that you get several readers, someone in your field, someone out of your field. Because a person in your field can point out things that you've overlooked, like, whoa, you totally forgot, you know, to list the conferences you went to. You know, you went to 3 last year, remember? But someone who is outside your field can show confusion. You know, if you haven't been clear, they'll let you know because they're not in the discipline. And if you're getting into too much jargon, you have to think about who your audience is when you're writing a portfolio. You tailor it for whatever school you're applying for example. I was just at a small liberal arts Catholic university yesterday, and in Houston, St. Thomas, and I would write a very different portfolio than I would applying here, where the emphasis is on research. You know, I'd be much more reflective, philosophic for St. Thomas than I would be for applying for a research institution. So always know who your audience is and why you're writing the portfolio, and tailor it. So those are great points. Can everyone hear Tom? He's talking about someone who can be critical, but in a constructive way, I assume. And look not just at the surface elements like grammar, but at the deeper ideas. And again, if you can get a portfolio partner where you can actually have a dialogue, you know, they'll draw you out and ask you probing questions, and bingo, you've got great material for your portfolio just on the basis of that conversation. Well, I have some cartoon prompts for these. I want someone who can problem solve, who can help me think through the portfolio, what should be in it, and you know, help me solve problems. I want someone who's diagnostic, who can cut to the chase and figure out, you know, what's going on. I want somebody to give me good advice, not the cape Larry, go for the cape. And I want someone who's kind and gentle, not like this. So it's important that you reflect on the kind of person you want. So Ray Shackelford has some great suggestions for the role you can play as portfolio partners. He says, discuss the roles you'll play. For example, since my field is composition, I really want to correct that grammar. I can't help it. You know, I'll see it and I want to circle it and the red and so forth. Well, I have to ask my partner first, do you want that? Or is that just going to slow you down by getting you worried about minutia? And so, you know, we have a conversation about what role I'll play. You want to just explore the portfolio options, so that little checklist might be a good starting point, or go to our webpage, because I've given you links to a lot of portfolios you can look at online. University of Texas, El Paso, for example, has a lot of really good portfolio examples, and it's very helpful to look at other examples. You want to set up a timeline so you can have future meetings. Our writing group, for example, meets every Wednesday, at least once a week. When you read the first draft, what he recommends is that you take notes and even use a highlighter about whether your partner is talking about what he or she does or why he or she does it. You want to get the why in there, and often it's too easy to focus on the I do this, I do this, I do this. But the point of a portfolio, at least your reflective commentary, is why are you doing it? If you're using active learning, why? There are some very good reasons to use active learning, and that should be reflected in your philosophy. Obviously, you want to give constructive feedback and kind of give and take, draw suggestions. If you partner with somebody where both of you are doing a portfolio, that's a very rich experience. So if you know you're going to be heading for the job market, find a buddy who's going to be heading for the job market, and just resolve to work together on your portfolios. And then Ray suggests 3 outside readers. I mentioned this earlier. Someone in the same discipline or field, someone who's not in the same field. And then he says someone who in the community who's not an educator. If they can read your reflective commentary, you don't force the whole flippin' portfolio on somebody. You just the reflective commentary. If they can read that and say, by golly, I never knew what you did up there at their university, then you did a good job. You did a good job of expressing yourself. And then finally, be happy. When you finally finish your portfolio, it's never finished. You always keep revising it, but you can still feel good that you've got it enough to send off, with the idea that you'll continue to polish it. So think about a work plan, and kind of mentally, how many of you think you will at some point do a teaching portfolio? Okay, has anyone started one or have one? Good for you. Okay, raise it higher. Catherine and what's your name? Lisa and Gib. Okay, there's 3 experts in the room who've gone through the process. It's actually, I mean, you feel good when you finish it. I guarantee you feel really good about it. So any advice from folks who've done it that you want to offer?
Get people to look at it. That's definitely very helpful.
Okay, get people to look at it.
I like to just continually work on it, to pick it up every couple of months and see if I need to fix anything. That way the task isn't so daunting when it comes down to sending it out. I've already got a lot done.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's excellent advice. Gib, any advice for folks?
It's one of those never-ending tasks. You're always polishing it up and
Yeah.
tweaking it and adding it and rearranging it.
But it's a lot easier to polish than it is to build it from scratch. So I think that's very good advice. Okay, any questions or comments?
I have a question.
Uh-huh.
When they, most positions, they ask for letters of recommendation from your colleagues and from your chair. Where would you suggest that we put those, and would you suggest them being very specific to the job, or can some of them be broad?
I would put them in an appendix, and you'd label it letters of recommendation. You put it up as one of the first appendix, so it's easy to spot. And yes, they should be specific to the job if you can get folks to do that.
Okay.
Because I write a fair number of letters for folks, and I always ask for the job description. And then I go through it very expressly to address all of the issues. And in fact, even in my job portfolio here, and we're almost ready to wrap up, in my letter, I gave first an overview, then I also have familiarity with current trends in scholarship of teaching and learning. That was in the job description. I possess both, and I put in quotes, a demonstrable record of excellence in teaching. So this is totally tailored to the particular job, and if your reference letters will do the same, then you've got all your bases covered twice or 3 times.
Also, how do you feel about recommendations that are not from professionals that are in your college, like professors that you've interacted with in previous work?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, one of our faculty members here who was going up for promotion and tenure on the basis of his teaching record, what was expected was that someone outside the university would vouch for him. So I happen to know I have 2 good friends who are well-known scholars, but with good teaching records in biology. So I contacted them, and then they talked to this person and reviewed his work, his research, and so forth related to teaching, and they wrote letters of recommendation based on that. So yes, make friends at conferences. It'll pay back. Yeah. Okay, well, we're out of time, so let me do a cartoon finale after this pithy quote from Parker Palmer. This is what a portfolio is about. So, start small, but start. That's the key, start. Remember, you've got to really organize carefully. Matthew's Apostle is something you have to organize. Take some risk in your portfolio, but if it's going to mean a job, don't be too risky. And finally, I say you do it, and trichinosis be damned. So thank you all very much.